Hello, everybody. How are you doing tonight? I hope you can hear me. I'm outside. We had a lot of rain here today, and we needed it, quite frankly. And I'm growing tomato plants that when I get home to New Hampshire, I'm going to plant them up there. So tonight's topic is conservative thoughts on transgender issues, and but before I get to that, before I get to the topic of discussion, I want to give you an update. A few weeks ago, I shared with everybody that I have this stalker, all right, and the stalker jumped in my car one morning. I had to jump out of my car. Was looking through my windows on another morning, and was on the hood of my car when this stalker was outside the door one morning. But it was like 4 times in 6 days. I had the stalker, and now the punchline is that the stalker is a frog. And so I want to give you an update on my stalker, the frog. Hi, Tim. How you doing? Haven't seen the frog. Haven't seen the frog in a few weeks. I'm really worried that one of these birds got the frog or something, but I have not seen my stalker in a few weeks. So that's the update. So let me get, I wear this New Hampshire Advantage hat, but I haven't seen my stalker, the frog, in the last few weeks, but I gotta get my hat on here. So when I see the frog again, I'll let you know if my frog stalker shows up again. At any rate, oh my gosh, he's on my hat. There's my stalker right there. So at any rate, tonight's topic, conservative thoughts on transgender issues. And let me just say, first of all, what I mean by conservative thoughts. And it will, first of all, it think about what conservative values are. And one conservative value that I think we often lose sight of as conservatives is compassion. We need to be compassionate. We need to be compassionate to young people who, no matter what issues they have and what problems they have and what they're dealing with, it is a conservative value to be compassionate, and it's okay to be compassionate towards people, even if they have views different than yours. And in fact, that's one of the things that I think that we are lacking in our politics today is we can disagree with people, but you can still be compassionate, you can still be caring. The other sort of conservative principle that I think comes into play here, and I'll dig into this as we go through it, is this idea that being a conservative, means that, where we are in our culture, where we are in our politics, where we are in our policies, is the result of, especially in our culture, of many, many, many years of experience and very wise decisions where we've incrementally evolved, and we have a lot of respect as conservatives, for the decisions that have led us where we are. It doesn't mean we don't change things. Of course we do. And it's important as a conservative to recognize when things need to be changed. versus, progressives. They want to jump into the sandbox and just, hey, progress is trying these 10 different things, and let's see what works and see if it's progressive. And so it, we've seen in the last, I think, 4 years, 5 years or so, this whole notion of gender identity just exploding, and with suddenness that we're seeing it just sort of forced into the culture, and on people, and there's two parts of that. One is, I'm a liberty guy, and people can do what they want to do. It's a different issue when it gets to young people, and I'll talk about that. But forcing other people to embrace things in our culture that they may not think it's right to embrace, and of course the whole transgender matter is sort of in the news and highlighted by what's going on in women's sports, and men who identify as a woman getting involved in women's sports, and we're hearing a lot from this young lady. I think her name's Riley Gaines. She was a swimmer at the University of Kentucky, an All-American swimmer, and she's really talking about this a lot now, because a guy by the name, who changed his name to Leah Thomas, who was a male swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years, and in his senior year he decided he was a woman and was allowed to compete as a woman in the NCAA swimming meets and in the NCAA national championships. And Riley Gaines was like I think either the freestyle or the butterfly was the #1 rated swimmer, female swimmer, and this Leah Thompson shows up at the NCAAs, and they let him change in the women's locker room, and without even notifying the female swimmers, and he ended up winning a lot of the races, and these poor young ladies who'd worked all their lives to reach that level of proficiency, are all suddenly pushed back and defeated by a man. And she's talking a lot about it, and she was talking, I think, at the University of San Francisco just last week, and you might have seen video on this, and the violent protest was just awful. I mean, calling her terrible names. The police had to usher her out. They were barricaded in a room for 3 hours, and the pro-trans demonstrators were violent and vicious, and it was really, really bad, which also brings up this whole issue of this of what I call a social contagion, about all this trans stuff. But here's an issue I want you to think about as it relates to men who say they're women participating in women's sports, and and all this has really created this whole new oppressed group of people in the that are transgender. So we have another group of oppressed people. But but here's the thing about it. And, first of all, we've been trying to get out of sports for a very, very, very long time, performance enhancing drugs. And it's certainly my view that the most powerful performance enhancing drug is a person with an XY chromosome competing against people with an XX chromosome. That is a man who is able to compete against women. And we all know the biological reasons why that's a huge advantage for the man. Now, here's the thing where I think the trans movement, there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. And this is where I think women really need to think this through to make sure, actually women really need to weigh in on this. And this is what I mean. And it's really hypocrisy against women who identify as a man. And let me explain what I mean to you as it relates to the sports. So we don't hear about women who identify as a man playing in men's sports for obvious reasons. They just, if they're at the same level, a woman who is a professional basketball player and identifies as a man has no chance of playing in the NBA. None. Zero. Actually, not much chance of playing major college basketball. So by the trans movement taking this position that trans men ought to be, I don't even like that term, men who identify as a woman ought to be able to play in women's sports, is really unfair to women who identify as a man. Because guess what? If a woman is a soccer player or a basketball player or a swimmer who identifies as a man, is not going to come out of the closet and say I'm identifying as a man because they know they won't be competitive swimming or playing basketball in men's sports. So this whole issue, it basically oppresses the trans community, is oppressing women who identify as men in sports, because it's a chilling effect. They won't come out and say they're trans because they want to continue to compete in women's sports. Now, it might be interesting if they come out and identify as a man and say they want to continue to compete in women's sports. Whether that would be allowed, particularly if they're taking testosterone or whatever. That if you remember, this is an okay boomer moment back in the day when the Soviet Union and East Germany, their women would come to the Olympics and they were on all these performance enhancing drugs and they dominated. And so it's really the trans community taking this position on sports as it relates to men who identify as women that has a chilling effect on women in sports who want to identify as a man but won't do it because they want to continue to compete as a woman. So think about that, and it's very hypocritical of them to do it. The other thing, and a lot of that I think is social contagion, as it relates to the protest against Riley Gaines, and yeah, it's so cool to have this man who identifies as a woman competing against women, but the other thing I want to get into about this is there was, and I'm going to read some things to you. There was a posting in February of 2023 by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which is a group that's highly ethical. That you know, they're not connected to hospitals. They're independent physicians. They really focus on the patient-physician relationship and the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. And they came out with a statement in February, and they really address this issue, and it's an issue related to what we hear progressives say a lot now as it relates to the transgender issue, and it's this notion of gender affirming care. So this notion that if you identify, if a man identifies as a woman or a woman identifies as a man, then they are entitled to gender affirming care. And that's become a progressive buzzword that say, okay, what does that mean? And let me read you the, paragraph 8 of this letter, which is the last paragraph from this group, this association of physicians and surgeons, of American physicians and surgeons. Paragraph 8 reads, quote, "Gender affirming care," end of quote, "in minors is medically and ethically contraindicated because of lack of informed consent. Period. There are inherently unknown and unknowable long-term risk, and the consequences of removing normal, healthy organs are irreversible." So the point here is, this idea that you're gonna do surgery, and they even talk about the whole puberty blockers there, and I'm going to read a paragraph about that in minors that's basically going to have irreversible impact. Is these doctors are essentially saying it's unethical and it's not putting the patient first. And another paragraph, this is interesting. Conflicting motivations have led to a growing industry dedicated to providing, quote, gender affirming, quote, procedures that are generally irreversible and have a high probability of causing sterilization, period. These include puberty blockers, sex hormones, and surgery. They commit a patient to lifelong need for medical, surgical, and psychological care. So and then the paragraph before that says, and I got some other stuff to read to you, but I want to read the paragraph before. There has been an explosive increase in persons who identify with the construct of gender different from sex at an age where identity is easily malleable and brain development is not fully concluded. And they're essentially saying, these young people that are saying they identify as a different sex, they're easily malleable. And what's happening, in my opinion, is this sort of social contagion in schools. And it reminds me, and these kids, they want to, they're looking for ways to get attention and to set themselves apart, and it can be all different kinds of things. And now this idea of transitioning is one of those things, in my opinion. And it's just awful, in my opinion, that schools now are assisting kids in transitioning or identifying or acting out on how they say they identify without parents being involved. To me, that's all part of the social contagion, the pressure on the kids, and if it's not pressure, it's a way to become more noticed. And it reminds me, I tell this story about my daughter, and she was about 10 or 11 or 12 even, or maybe even 13. We were walking through the mall one day, and coming down was a young person in a wheelchair getting all kinds of attention. And my daughter said, "Gee, Dad, I really wish I was in a wheelchair," because the attention was she gravitated to that. And I, of course, talked to her and said, it's health is the number one thing in life, and you're healthy and you should be happy you're healthy and take care of yourself. And of course, we're compassionate to anybody who's in a wheelchair, but it's really not the way to get attention. Be healthy, that's the way to get attention. So young people are influenced by those things. So this and the essence of this statement is, of this letter by the American Association of Surgeons and Physicians is, hey, these are young people and making decisions when they're young. These are could be lifelong decisions, and doctors their first priority in the doctor-patient relationship is to do no harm, and essentially they're also saying we really don't know, and there's a lot of reasons for someone to maybe even go through a phase of identifying as a different sex, and to do something that's irreversible when someone might be in a phase is a thing that doctors ought not do and need to think about. The other interesting thing here, and this kind of goes to this whole issue of this conservative thought premise that let's take things slowly. And this is really, I think, applicable, and you may have heard about this, you may not have heard about it, but in the UK, United Kingdom, they have a clinic. It's called the Gender Identity Development Service in London, and it's also known as Tavistock, named after, I think, the person who founded it. And this thing has been in existence since 1989. So the UK in London has had, and we have government National Health Service in the UK. So this is government medical care, and this Tavistock, this place called Tavistock, is being closed down. Like right now, they're directed to close down in the spring, and the reason they're shutting it down, is this clinic, Tavistock, only had one approach, and it was gender affirming care. Someone shows up, someone young shows up, says, I think I'm a different sex. Boom, gender affirming care, including this irreversible stuff. So let me read some quotes from the UK's National Health Service about this. They had an independent review done of this Tavistock place, and the independent review condemned the clinic as, quote, not a safe or viable long-term option, end of quote, because its interventions are based on poor evidence and its model of care, gender-affirming care, leaves young people at, quote, considerable risk, end of quote, of poor mental health. And you know, so this is a clinic with over 30 years of experience dealing with this issue of people identifying as a different sex. And the UK is shutting down this gender affirming care clinic. And what they're doing is they're saying we're shutting down this siloed gender affirming care clinic, and we're going to have children, be looked at in children's hospitals. And here's the quote. So they want to work across related services so quote, in order to embed the care of children and young people, teenagers, with gender-related distress within a broader child and adolescent health context. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is, you know what, this may be a phase. There might be other trauma going on. There might be something else psychologically going on. So let's look at the big picture, and figure out what's going on instead of directly to gender affirming care, which I don't know should ever happen in a young person. I don't think it should, quite frankly. So, so they talk about, here's a good one. So they talk about, when they want to break the silo and that they, along with this reorganization comes a belated recognition of the poor state of knowledge around puberty blockers. Let me read that again. Belated recognition of the poor state of knowledge around puberty blockers. So again, this is a clinic in the UK with over 30 years of experience in gender dysphoria issues, and they're shutting it down. Why don't we learn from that in America? I think we should, and it goes to this whole issue of this conservative value of go slow, be wise, get as much information as you can. So the doctor, Dr. Hilary Cass, who is a former president of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health, who was the chair of this independent review of Tavistock, she emphasizes that there is, quote, no way of knowing whether, rather than buying time to make a decision, puberty blockers may disrupt that decision-making process and disrupt brain development, which could have significant impact on the ability to make complex, risk-laden decisions, as well as possible long-term neuropsychological consequences. And she's basically saying, slow down. Let's not put these young people in a position where, they're with puberty blockers and other things that will make their decision-making process in the future, not very reliable. So, and this is going on in other countries that have had this gender affirming care for a long time. Other European countries like Sweden and Finland. Yeah. So, and here's the key quote out of this that is really, really important. And it says, first, there is insufficient evidence to justify the general clinical use of puberty suppression or cross-sex hormone use in youth experiencing gender dysphoria. Insufficient evidence to justify. Right? Now, these are scientists. These are doctors. So some, like, some in the government are saying the science is settled. Well, it's just not. I mean, here's, from over 30 years experience that there's insufficient evidence to justify the general clinical use of puberty suppressant or cross-sex hormone. Second, a treatment regimen that focuses exclusively on gender dysphoria, ignoring co-occurring mental health conditions, will not provide optimal care for young people. Think about that. A treatment regimen that focuses exclusively on gender dysphoria, ignoring co-occurring mental health conditions, will not provide optimal care for young children, for young people. And what they're basically saying is, hey, if someone's experiencing this, there might be other reasons. There might be other mental health conditions going on. And we have to look at all of that instead of only gender affirming care. And lastly, the shutdown of Tavistock, again, this clinic in the UK that's been doing gender affirming care for over 30 years, and this is happening in Sweden and Finland too. The shutdown of Tavistock is not merely a restructuring move in response to the clinic's failed operations. It's a move away from the, quote, gender affirming, quote, intervention care model, and toward whole person affirming care that is rooted in developmental psychology. So these are scientists with a lot of experience, a lot of history around this issue, and they're essentially saying, hey, we're shutting down the clinic that was gender affirming care only, and we're taking a much wider approach to the kind of care that young people need and what other mental health issues may be at play here, before there are any life-altering decisions. And listen, that that doesn't mean that a person, when they get older, that if they want to make decisions that results in them transitioning, they're old enough to make those decisions when they're older. But young people, I mean, this is fascinating. We don't hear about this in the States. This isn't voodoo anything. This isn't misinformation. This is what the UK did. And then the other letter from the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. So, the science isn't settled here. And as conservatives, we need to be compassionate, and we need to take a very slow, wise approach to all this. And we cannot succumb to the political pressure, coming from progressives on this issue. There's and this whole idea of social contagion, where the schools are assisting kids to transition without parents knowing, and the violent protests against people like Riley Gaines, and it, it's politically, I think they're just the progressives are trying to create another oppressed group, and by doing so, as I said earlier, I think women need to step back and look at this, because guess what? If you're if you're an athlete, a female athlete playing in the WNBA, who actually has gender dysphoria, you're 25, you're going to be chilled from transitioning, right? Because you have no chance of playing in the NBA. So what they're doing with this sports is really oppressing their own. The progressives are oppressing their own. At any rate, thanks for listening. I went a little longer tonight than I normally do, but thanks so much for listening. And hold on a second. For some reason, these comments aren't coming up. I've got to check that. Have a good week, and so much going on in the world. And if you have any suggestions for things you'd like me to talk about, just let me know. And maybe that frog stalker will show up again. We'll see you. Have a great night. Bye-bye.